My name is Derek Thompson. I'm 27 years old, and I live alone in a cramped apartment on the outskirts of Seattle, Washington. It's not much to look at. A third-floor walk-up in a building that's seen better decades. The tiles in the bathroom are chipped and discolored. The hinges on every door squeak no matter how much W40 I spray on them. And there's a window in the living room that never quite closes all the way, letting in a persistent draft that makes the curtains flutter even on still nights. But it's mine, or at least I pay rent on it. And in a city like Seattle where the cost of living climbs higher every year, that counts for something. I work night shifts as a rideshare driver for one of those app-based companies everyone uses but nobody really thinks about. You know the type: ping, you get a request, you drive across town, pick up a stranger, make small talk or sit in awkward silence depending on their mood, drop them off, repeat. It's not glamorous work. Some nights I'm ferrying drunk college kids from Capitol Hill back to their dorms. Other nights it's exhausted nurses finishing their shifts at Harborview, or business types catching early morning flights out of SeaTac. The job pays just enough to cover rent, groceries, gas, and the occasional beer. No family nearby to lean on. My parents retired to Arizona years ago, and we talk maybe once a month if that. No close friends either, except for Jason, my old college buddy from the University of Washington, and even he's always busy these days with his consulting job that has him traveling more than he's home. Most nights I come back to my apartment around 2 or 3 in the morning, peel off my jacket that smells like a mix of air freshener and other people's cologne, crack open whatever's in the fridge, and collapse on my sagging couch until it's time to do it all over again. It's a lonely existence, but it's stable. Predictable. Nobody bothers me and I don't bother anyone. That's how I like it, or at least that's what I tell myself when the silence gets too heavy. That particular Wednesday night in late October had been brutal. I'd been driving for 12 hours straight, one ride after another without a break, chasing surge pricing across the city. My back ached from sitting. My eyes burned from staring at headlights and street signs in the fog, and my mind felt like it was wrapped in cotton. The weather had turned nasty around midnight. Thick fog rolling in from Puget Sound, blanketing everything in a cold, damp embrace that made visibility terrible and driving treacherous. By the time I finished my last ride, dropping off a quiet couple in Ballard, it was 1:30 a.m., and all I wanted was to get home, maybe take a hot shower, and pass out. I navigated through the empty streets, the fog so thick my headlights barely cut through it. The city felt deserted, almost post-apocalyptic, with the streetlights creating these eerie halos of orange light that faded into gray nothing. When I finally turned onto my street, a quiet residential block lined with old apartment buildings and a few scraggly trees, I was already mentally checked out, my body moving on autopilot. That's when I noticed the car. It was parked directly outside my building. A silver Honda Accord with the engine off and the lights dark. At first, I almost drove past it, figuring it was just another resident's car. But something made me look twice. Maybe it was the way it was positioned, slightly crooked as if it had been parked in a hurry. Or maybe it was some subconscious recognition. Either way, I slowed down, pulled into my usual spot a few spaces ahead, and killed my engine. For a moment, I just sat there, staring at the Honda in my rearview mirror. The fog swirled around it, and I could just barely make out the silhouette of someone sitting in the driver's seat, completely still. My first thought was that it might be someone waiting to pick up a rideshare, though that didn't make much sense at this hour in this neighborhood. My second thought was more paranoid. Maybe it was someone casing the building, looking for cars to break into or apartments to rob. Seattle had its share of property crime, and this wouldn't be the first time I'd seen something sketchy on my street. But then, as I squinted through the fog and dim light, recognition hit me like a cold wave. I knew that car. I'd been in it before, years ago when Jason and I were still in college and his mom would occasionally pick us up from campus when we'd had too much to drink at some party or another. Linda Morrison, Jason's mom. My heart rate picked up, confusion mixing with concern. What the hell was she doing parked outside my apartment at 1:30 in the morning? Jason was out of town. I knew that because he'd texted me last week saying he'd be in Austin for some big consulting project and wouldn't be back until next month. So why was his mom here, in the fog, sitting alone in her car with the engine off? I grabbed my phone, Checked to see if I'd missed any messages or calls from Jason. Nothing. Just the usual junk notifications and a promotional email from some restaurant I'd ordered from 6 months ago. I pocketed my phone, took a deep breath, and got out of my car. The cold hit me immediately, that damp Seattle cold that seeps into your bones. I zipped my jacket up and walked slowly toward the Honda, my footsteps echoing softly on the wet pavement. As I got closer, I could see more details through the fogged-up windows. There was definitely someone in the driver's seat, hunched forward slightly, and even through the condensation I could tell something was wrong. I approached the driver's side window and hesitated for just a second before reaching out and tapping gently on the glass with my knuckle. 3 soft raps. The figure inside jumped violently, a sharp intake of breath audible even through the closed window. Then, slowly, the window rolled down about halfway, and I found myself looking at Linda Morrison. Except she looked nothing like the woman I remembered. Linda had always been put together, the kind of person who radiated quiet competence and warmth. She was in her early 50s, worked some high-level corporate job that Jason rarely talked about in detail, and whenever I'd seen her at Jason's place or at family gatherings I'd been invited to, she'd been impeccably dressed, always smiling, always asking thoughtful questions about how school was going or how life was treating me. She had this way of making you feel like you mattered, like she genuinely cared about your answer. The woman staring at me now was a ghost of that person. Her face was streaked with tears, black mascara running in thin rivers down her cheeks. Her eyes were red and swollen, like she'd been crying for hours. Her hair, usually styled perfectly, was disheveled and hanging loose around her face. She wore a cardigan pulled tight around her shoulders, and even in the dim light, I could see she was shaking. Whether from cold or emotion, I couldn't tell. She looked utterly broken, like someone who'd been carrying the weight of the world and had finally collapsed under it. "Derek?" she whispered, her voice hoarse and trembling. She blinked at me as if she couldn't quite believe I was real.
"I'm sorry."
"I'm so sorry. I didn't know where else to go." My mind raced, trying to process what I was seeing. "Mrs. Morrison? What's going on? Are you okay? Where's Jason?" She shook her head quickly, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "He's traveling, Austin, for work. Couldn't call him with this. I can't drag him into this mess. Her voice broke, and she pressed a hand to her mouth, trying to hold back a sob. I glanced around the empty street, the fog pressing in on all sides, and then back at her. Every instinct told me something was seriously wrong. This wasn't just a bad day or a rough patch. This was someone in crisis. "Mrs. Morrison, you can't just sit out here in the cold like this," I said, trying to keep my voice steady and calm even though my heart was pounding. "Come inside. We can talk. Whatever's going on. Sitting in your car at 2 in the morning isn't going to help." She looked up at me, and for a moment, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Hope, maybe, or desperation, or both. She hesitated, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles were white. "I don't want to impose," she whispered. I saw you drop Jason off here once, months ago. I remembered the building. I've been driving around for hours, and I just ended up here. I don't know why."
"I'm sorry."
"You're not imposing," I said firmly. "Come on, let's get you inside where it's warm." After what felt like an eternity, she nodded slowly. She killed the engine, grabbed a small purse from the passenger seat, and opened the door. As she stepped out, I could see she was unsteady on her feet, whether from exhaustion or stress. I reached out instinctively to steady her, and she didn't pull away. Together, we walked toward the entrance of my building, the fog swallowing the street behind us. I unlocked the outer door, held it open for her, and we climbed the 3 flights of stairs in silence. My apartment suddenly felt too small, too messy, too inadequate for whatever crisis had brought Jason's mom to my doorstep in the middle of the night. But as I unlocked my apartment door and gestured for her to come inside, I knew one thing for certain. Whatever was happening, I couldn't just turn her away. She stepped inside, and I closed the door behind us, shutting out the cold and the fog and the empty street. Inside, I made her tea while she sat on my worn couch, clutching a tissue. Her hands shook as she took the mug. "I'm sorry for showing up like this," Linda said quietly, staring down at the tea in her hands as if it might hold answers she desperately needed. "I know this is bizarre. I know you must think I've lost my mind." I sat down in the chair across from her, trying to project a calmness I didn't feel. "It's okay, Mrs. Morrison. Really. Just tell me what happened. Whatever it is, we'll figure it out." She took a shaky breath, and for a moment, I thought she might break down again. But instead, she seemed to gather herself, drawing on some inner reserve of strength I could only imagine. When she finally looked up at me, her eyes were still red but clearer, more focused. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen to the whole thing before you decide I'm crazy or paranoid," she began. "Can you do that?" "Of course," I said immediately. She nodded, took a sip of the tea, and set the mug down on the coffee table with trembling hands. "I've worked for the past 15 years as the chief financial officer at Cascade Energy. Do you know them?" I nodded. Everyone in Seattle knew Cascade Energy. They were one of those companies that had grown explosively over the past decade, riding the wave of renewable energy investment. They built wind farms and solar installations, marketed themselves as the future of clean power, and their CEO, a man named Vincent Drummond, was practically a local celebrity. Billionaire philanthropist, always in the news for donating to environmental causes or speaking at conferences about climate change. The kind of guy who got fawning profiles in business magazines. "I know of them," I said. "Big renewable energy company, right? Vincent Drummond's company." "That's right," Linda said, and something dark flickered across her face when I mentioned Drummond's name. Vincent Drummond. Everyone thinks he's this visionary, this genius who's going to save the planet while making billions. The media loves him. Politicians love him. He's untouchable. She paused, her jaw tightening. "But it's all a lie, Derek. All of it." I leaned forward, my full attention on her now. "What do you mean?" 3 months ago, I was doing routine financial reviews, quarterly audits, reconciling accounts, the kind of thing I've done 1,000 times. But I noticed something odd. Small discrepancies in our vendor payments. Amounts that didn't quite match up with the contracts on file. At first, I thought it was just clerical errors, maybe some invoices that hadn't been properly documented. But the more I dug, the more I found. Her hands clenched into fists on her lap. "Vincent has been laundering money, Derek. Billions of dollars. He's set up shell companies, fake vendors that don't actually exist or that are controlled by people connected to him. Cascade Energy pays these vendors for services that were never rendered, equipment that was never delivered, consulting that never happened. The money gets funneled through these shell companies, then moved offshore to accounts in the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, Panama. Places where it's nearly impossible to trace." I felt my stomach drop. "Jesus, that's massive fraud." "It's more than fraud," Linda said, her voice rising slightly with barely contained anger. "It's organized crime. He's not just stealing from the company, he's stealing from investors, from pension funds, from the government grants we receive for renewable energy projects. Taxpayer money, Derek. Money that's supposed to be going toward building clean energy infrastructure is ending up in Vincent's personal accounts. And it's not just him. He has a whole network. His CFO before me knew, his head of operations knows, his personal attorney is facilitating it. It's systemic." I sat back, trying to process what she was telling me. "So what did you do? Did you report it?" Linda laughed bitterly. "I tried to do the right thing. I thought maybe stupidly, naively, that it might be some kind of misunderstanding. That maybe Vincent didn't know. That someone else was manipulating the books and he'd be horrified when I told him. So I went to him privately. I scheduled a meeting in his office, brought my documentation, and I laid it all out for him." She paused, her eyes distant, reliving the memory. "He listened to everything I had to say. He looked at the evidence. And then Derek, he smiled. Actually smiled. And he said, 'Linda, I'm disappointed in you. I thought you were smarter than this.' What did he mean? He meant that I should have kept my mouth shut, that I should have played along, maybe even taken a cut for myself. He offered me money right there, $500,000 wired to any account I wanted, tax-free, if I would just forget what I'd seen and continue processing the payments without questions. When I refused, when I told him I was going to report it to the board of directors and to federal authorities, his whole demeanor changed. He stopped smiling. He leaned across his desk, and he told me that if I pursued this, I would regret it for the rest of my very short career. Linda's voice had dropped to almost a whisper now, and I could see her fighting to keep her composure. I thought he was just trying to scare me. I thought that once I got out of his office and contacted the right people, it would be fine. But Derek, within 48 hours, my entire life fell apart. What happened? I was fired first. Immediate termination. But not just fired, accused. Vincent had his IT team plant evidence in my email account, backdated messages that made it look like I had been the one approving the fraudulent payments. They altered digital logs to show that I had accessed restricted financial systems, that I had been communicating with the shell company representatives. They built an entire false narrative that painted me as the mastermind behind the embezzlement scheme. My hands had gone cold. That's insane. Couldn't you prove it wasn't you? How? Linda asked, her voice breaking. The digital evidence is compelling. Emails with my name on them, my login credentials, my digital signature. Vincent has an entire team of experts who specialize in this kind of thing, covering tracks, creating false trails. And he moved fast. Before I could even hire a lawyer or gather my own evidence, he had frozen my assets. He can do that? He claimed I owed the company restitution for the stolen funds. He got a friendly judge to issue an emergency order freezing my bank accounts, my investment accounts, even put a lien on my house. I can't access my own money, Derek. Everything I've worked for, saved for, it's all locked away. I couldn't even pay a retainer for a good attorney. The only lawyer I could afford was a public defender type who took one look at the case and basically told me I was screwed. I felt a surge of anger on her behalf. This is unbelievable. Surely someone can see through this? What about Jason? Does he know? Linda shook her head quickly. I haven't told him. I can't. He's building his career, he's finally stable after years of struggling. If I drag him into this mess, if Vincent's people start looking at him too, I can't do that to my son. Besides, what could he do? Vincent Drummond is a billionaire with unlimited resources. Jason's just a consultant trying to make rent. She pulled her cardigan tighter around herself, and that's when I noticed them. The bruises on her wrists. They were partially hidden by the fabric, but as she moved, I caught glimpses of dark purple marks, the unmistakable pattern of fingerprints where someone had grabbed her hard. Mrs. Morrison, I said carefully, nodding toward her wrists. Those bruises. What happened? She followed my gaze and quickly adjusted her sleeves to cover them. But it was too late. She'd been seen. For a moment, she looked like she might deny it or brush it off. But then her shoulders sagged in defeat. His security team, she said quietly. Vincent has private security, ex-military types, the kind of people who know how to hurt you without leaving too much evidence. They cornered me 2 days ago outside my lawyer's office. There were 2 of them, big guys in suits. They pulled me into an alley, and they asked me if I had made copies of the evidence. If I had proof stored somewhere that could still hurt Vincent. And did you? I asked. Linda looked at me for a long moment, as if weighing whether she could trust me. Then slowly she nodded. Yes, before everything went to hell, I made copies. I downloaded everything onto a flash drive, transaction records, emails, offshore account numbers, communications with shell company representatives. Everything. I knew I might need insurance. Where is it? Hidden. I have a storage unit across town, one of those places where you can rent a small locker. It's under a different name, paid for in cash. The flash drive is there, locked away. It's the only leverage I have. Did you tell them that? No, she said firmly. I told them I didn't have anything, that Vincent had destroyed all the evidence when he fired me. But they didn't believe me. One of them grabbed my wrists, she gestured to the bruises, and twisted until I thought my bones were going to break. He told me that if I was lying, if any evidence surfaced, they'd find me again and it would be much worse. The room felt suddenly colder.
Jesus Christ.
Mrs. Morrison, this is beyond corporate fraud. This is witness intimidation. Assault. You need to go to the police. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. The police? Derek Vincent Drummond donates millions to the mayor's re-election campaign. He sits on charitable boards with half the city council. The police chief plays golf with him every month. If I walk into a police station and try to report this, I guarantee you that within an hour, Vincent will know about it. And his people will come for me before I make it home. What about federal authorities? The FBI? I've thought about that, Linda admitted. Financial crimes, money laundering, that's FBI territory. But I need to be smart about how I approach them. I can't just walk in off the street with a wild story. I need evidence, and I need to make sure I'm protected before I hand it over. Because the moment that flash drive changes hands, I become either a witness who needs protecting or a loose end that Vincent needs to eliminate. I ran my hands through my hair, feeling overwhelmed. This was so far beyond anything I'd ever dealt with. I was a rideshare driver living paycheck to paycheck in a crappy apartment. What was I supposed to do against a billionaire with unlimited resources and no moral compass? But looking at Linda, broken, terrified, with nowhere else to turn, I knew I couldn't just do nothing. Okay, I said finally. Okay, here's what we're going to do. First, you're staying here tonight. It's not safe for you to be alone in your car or trying to find a hotel where someone might recognize you. Second, tomorrow we figure out how to get that flash drive safely and how to contact the right people at the FBI. I have a cousin, Rachel, who works for the federal government. She's with the FBI's Financial Crimes Division in the Seattle field office. I can reach out to her, see if she can help. Linda's eyes widened. You have a contact at the FBI? Sort of. I mean, we're not super close, but she's family. We see each other at Thanksgiving and stuff. She'd take a meeting, at least listen to what you have to say. For the first time since I'd found her in the car, something like hope flickered across Linda's face. Derek, if you could do that, if there's any chance. We'll try, I said. But Mrs. Morrison, I need you to be completely honest with me. Is there anything else? Anything you haven't told me that could come back and bite us? She shook her head. No. I've told you everything. I swear. I wanted to believe her. Looking into her exhausted, desperate eyes, I chose to believe her. All right then, I said. Let's get through tonight first. You can take my bed, I'll sleep on the couch. Tomorrow we start fighting back. Linda stood up, and before I could react, she crossed the space between us and wrapped her arms around me in a tight hug. She was shaking, her face pressed against my shoulder, and I could feel hot tears soaking through my shirt. Thank you, she whispered. You don't know what this means. Jason was right about you. He always said you were the most loyal friend anyone could have. I awkwardly patted her back, unsure how to respond. It's going to be okay, Mrs. Morrison. We'll figure this out. As I helped her get settled in my bedroom, finding her a spare toothbrush and some clean towels, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just stepped off a cliff into something far deeper and more dangerous than I understood. But there was no turning back now. The next morning came too quickly. I'd barely slept on the couch, my mind racing with everything Linda had told me, jumping at every sound from the street below. When gray Seattle dawn finally filtered through my inadequate curtains, I found myself staring at the ceiling, wondering what the hell I'd gotten myself into. Linda emerged from the bedroom around 7, looking marginally better than she had the night before. She'd washed her face, pulled her hair back into a ponytail, and there was a determination in her eyes that hadn't been there in the foggy darkness. She was wearing the same clothes from yesterday, but she carried herself differently. Less like a victim, more like someone preparing for battle. I didn't sleep much, she admitted, accepting the coffee I'd brewed. But I feel clearer. Thank you for letting me stay, Derek. I know this is asking a lot. Don't worry about it, I said, pulling out my phone. Let me text my cousin Rachel. See if she can meet with us today. I composed a careful message, trying to strike the right balance between urgent and not completely insane. Hey Rachel. I know this is random, but I have a friend who's dealing with a serious financial fraud situation. Corporate embezzlement, money laundering, the works. She has evidence but needs to talk to someone she can trust at the FBI. Any chance you could meet with us today? It's legitimately important. Rachel's response came 15 minutes later. That's quite the Wednesday morning text, Derek. I'm intrigued and slightly concerned. I can meet at 2 p.m. There's a coffee shop in Tacoma called the Grindhouse on Pacific Avenue. Neutral ground. Come alone with your friend. And Derek? This better not be some weird prank. I showed the message to Linda, whose hands trembled slightly as she read it. Tacoma. That's good. Far enough from Seattle that Vincent's people are less likely to spot us. There's one thing we need to do first, I said. We need to get that flash drive from your storage unit. Rachel's going to want to see the evidence, and we can't exactly tell her it's locked away in some storage facility we might not be able to access safely later. Linda nodded slowly. The storage place is in Georgetown. Industrial area, not a lot of foot traffic. I've been paying cash month to month under the name Sarah Chin. It should be safe, but Vincent's people might be watching it, I finished. Or watching you, looking for you to lead them to it. Exactly. We sat in silence for a moment, both understanding the risk. Finally, I stood up. Okay, here's what we'll do. We'll take my car, not yours. We'll drive through Georgetown, scope out the storage place first. If anything looks off, suspicious cars, people hanging around, we bail immediately. If it looks clear, we go in quick, get the flash drive, and get out. Then we head straight to Tacoma. Linda looked at me with something close to admiration. You've really thought this through. I've watched a lot of crime shows, I said with a weak smile. Come on. Let's do this before I lose my nerve. The drive to Georgetown took about 20 minutes. It was a gray, drizzly morning, typical Seattle weather, and the streets were busy with morning commuters. I kept checking my mirrors obsessively, looking for any sign that we were being followed. Linda sat rigid in the passenger seat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, occasionally glancing at the side mirror. The storage facility was called Safekeep Storage, a squat concrete building surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. It was sandwiched between an auto repair shop and a wholesale plumbing supplier, exactly the kind of anonymous industrial location where you could come and go without attracting attention. I drove past it once, slowly, scanning the parking lot and surrounding streets. There were a few cars in the lot, a beat-up pickup truck, a minivan, a couple of sedans, but no black SUVs or obvious security vehicles. No one sitting in parked cars watching the entrance. The auto repair shop next door had several mechanics working on vehicles in the open bays, and the plumbing supplier's lot was busy with delivery trucks. Normal Wednesday morning activity. Looks clear, I said, circling the block and pulling into the storage facility's parking lot. Let's make this fast. We got out, and Linda led me to the entrance. She punched in a code on the keypad, 4-7-2-9, and the heavy metal door buzzed open. Inside, the facility was dimly lit and smelled like concrete and motor oil. Rows of orange metal doors lined narrow corridors, each secured with heavy-duty padlocks. Our footsteps echoed as we walked quickly to Unit 237. Linda pulled a key from her purse. She'd been carrying it with her this whole time, and unlocked the padlock. The door rolled up with a metallic screech that made us both flinch. Inside was a space about 5 feet by 5 feet, nearly empty except for a cardboard box in the corner and a small duffel bag. Linda went straight for the duffel bag, unzipped it, and pulled out a small black leather case. She opened it to reveal a silver flash drive, no bigger than her thumb. Such a small thing to contain evidence that could topple a billionaire's empire. Got it, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She zipped the flash drive back into the case and slipped it into her purse. That's when I heard it. The sound of a car engine in the parking lot, moving slowly, deliberately. Then another. My stomach dropped. We need to go. Now. I pulled the storage unit door down, and Linda fumbled with the padlock, her hands shaking. The metallic click as it locked seemed impossibly loud. We hurried back down the corridor toward the exit, but through the small window in the metal door, I could see 2 black SUVs pulling into the parking lot, boxing in my car. Shit, I breathed. They're here. Linda's face went white. How did they know? Doesn't matter. Is there another exit? She shook her head, panic rising in her voice. I don't think so. This is the only way in and out. I looked around frantically. The corridor stretched back into the building, disappearing into dimness. Come on. We go deeper in. Find a place to hide. Call 911. We ran down the corridor, turning corners at random, passing rows of identical orange doors. Behind us, I heard the front door buzz open. They'd somehow gotten the entry code or bypassed it. Heavy footsteps echoed through the building, at least 2 sets, maybe more. Split up and search, a man's voice commanded. She's here somewhere. Don't let her leave with that flash drive. Linda grabbed my arm, pulling me into a narrow alcove between units. We pressed ourselves against the cold concrete wall, barely breathing. The footsteps grew closer, methodical, checking units. I could hear padlocks being rattled, doors being tested. My phone was in my pocket. Moving as slowly and quietly as possible, I pulled it out and dialed 911. The operator answered on the second ring. 911, what's your emergency? We're being chased by armed men at Safekeep Storage in Georgetown, I whispered urgently. 4525 Corson Avenue. 2 suspects, possibly more. We're hiding inside. Please send help immediately. Sir, can you speak up? I'm having trouble hearing you. I can't. I hissed. They'll hear me. Just send police. Now. Units are being dispatched. Stay on the line. A flashlight beam swept across the corridor, and I immediately ended the call, shoving the phone back into my pocket. The footsteps were right around the corner from our hiding spot. Linda was trembling violently beside me, her breathing rapid and shallow. I put a hand on her shoulder, trying to steady her, to keep her quiet. The flashlight beam passed by our alcove, moved on, then suddenly swung back. A figure stepped into view. A large man in a dark suit, exactly as Linda had described. Ex-military bearing, cold eyes, a professional's economy of movement. He pointed the flashlight directly at us. Found them. Everything happened fast. The man moved toward us, reaching inside his jacket. Without thinking, I grabbed a fire extinguisher mounted on the wall near us and swung it hard at his head. It connected with a sickening thud, and he stumbled backward, dropping the flashlight. I grabbed Linda's hand and ran. We sprinted through the corridors, taking turns randomly, our footsteps echoing like thunder. Behind us, I could hear shouting, multiple voices, more footsteps pounding after us. My lungs burned. My heart hammered against my ribs. Linda was gasping beside me, struggling to keep up. We turned a corner and found ourselves facing a dead end. A wall with nothing but a small window high up, too small to climb through. We were trapped. The footsteps were getting closer. Linda turned to me, her eyes wide with terror. Derek, the flash drive, take it. Run. They want me, but you can still. Absolutely not, I said firmly. We're in this together, remember? The footsteps rounded the corner. 2 men this time, both large, both advancing toward us with grim determination. There was nowhere to go, no way out. This was it. And then, like a miracle, I heard it, sirens. Lots of them. Getting closer. The 2 men heard it too and exchanged glances. One of them spoke into a radio. Police incoming. Do we proceed? A crackling voice responded. Negative. Abort. Get out of there. They turned and ran, their footsteps receding rapidly. Within seconds, they were gone, and we were alone in the corridor, both of us shaking, gasping for breath. The sirens reached the building, and I heard car doors slamming, voices shouting, "Police!" The front door buzzed open, and uniformed officers flooded into the storage facility. "Here!" I shouted, my voice hoarse. "We're here. Back here." 2 officers appeared at the end of the corridor, weapons drawn. "Seattle PD. Show me your hands." We raised our hands immediately. "We're the ones who called," I said quickly. "We're the victims. The men who were chasing us. They ran when they heard the sirens." The officers approached cautiously, and within minutes, the storage facility was crawling with police. They took our statements, searched for the attackers who had long since fled, and called for detectives. The whole thing was a blur of questions, radio chatter, and fluorescent lights. Linda sat on the back bumper of a patrol car, wrapped in a blanket someone had given her, clutching her purse with the flash drive still inside. I sat beside her, my hands still shaking from adrenaline. "That was too close," she whispered. "Yeah," I agreed. "But we got the evidence. And we're still alive. That's something." A detective approached us, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor.
I'm Detective Martinez.
"I understand you two have quite a story. Why don't you start from the beginning?" I glanced at Linda and she nodded. "Actually, Detective, we have a meeting in Tacoma at 2 p.m. with an FBI agent. This is bigger than just an assault case. It's corporate fraud, money laundering, witness intimidation.
Federal crimes.
Detective Martinez raised an eyebrow. "Is that right? Well then, I think we'd better make sure you get to that meeting safely." She pulled out her radio and called for a patrol escort, her eyes conveying understanding and perhaps a hint of respect. As we drove to Tacoma in my car with a police cruiser following behind us, Linda finally allowed herself to cry. Not from fear this time, but from relief. We'd made it. We had the evidence, and we were about to hand it over to someone who could actually do something with it. The Grindhouse coffee shop in Tacoma was a small, cozy place with exposed brick walls and the rich smell of espresso. Rachel was already there when we arrived, sitting in a corner booth with a laptop open in front of her. She was in her mid-30s, with dark hair pulled back in a professional bun and the kind of alert, intelligent eyes that missed nothing. She stood as we approached, and I saw her take in Linda's disheveled appearance, the patrol car visible through the window, and the barely controlled tension in both of us. "Derek," she said carefully, "this looks serious." "It is," I replied. "Rachel, this is Linda Morrison. Linda, my cousin Rachel Chin, FBI Financial Crimes Division." We sat down and Linda placed her purse on the table. "Agent Chun, thank you for meeting with us. I know this must seem irregular." "That's one word for it," Rachel said. But her tone was professional, not dismissive. "Derek's text mentioned embezzlement and money laundering. Why don't you tell me what's going on?" Linda took a deep breath and began. She told the whole story, her position at Cascade Energy, discovering Vincent Drummond's massive fraud scheme, being fired and framed, the asset freeze, the threats, the assault. She spoke clearly and methodically, and I watched Rachel's expression shift from skepticism to concern to barely concealed anger. When Linda finished, Rachel was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "Do you have proof?" Linda pulled the leather case from her purse and placed it on the table. "Everything's on this flash drive. Transaction records, offshore account numbers, emails, forged documents. Years of evidence." Rachel picked up the case, opened it, and examined the flash drive. "And you're willing to testify? To be a witness in a federal case?" "Yes," Linda said without hesitation. "I want Vincent Drummond to pay for what he's done." Rachel pulled out her laptop and a portable drive reader. "Let me take a preliminary look. If this is what you say it is, we'll need to move quickly. Drummond clearly knows you have evidence, and he's willing to use violence to get it back." She plugged in the flash drive and began scrolling through files. Her eyes widened almost immediately.
Jesus.
This is extensive. Offshore accounts in 7 different countries. Shell companies, forged invoices, falsified audits. She looked up at Linda. "How did you compile all this without anyone noticing?" "I was the CFO," Linda said simply. "I had access to everything, and I was careful." Rachel continued reviewing the files, occasionally making notes on a pad beside her laptop. The coffee shop bustled around us, but at our table, the air was thick with tension. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, Rachel closed the laptop and looked at both of us. "This is legitimate," she said. "This is one of the biggest corporate fraud cases I've seen in years. We're talking RICO charges, money laundering, wire fraud, obstruction of justice, witness tampering. Federal prison for decades, maybe life, plus billions in fines and restitution." Linda's eyes filled with tears. "So you believe me?" I believe the evidence, Rachel said. And yes, I believe you. Mrs. Morrison, as of right now, you're under federal protective custody. The words federal protective custody should have brought relief, but instead, they ushered in 3 of the most grueling weeks of my life. Rachel made calls right there in the coffee shop, and within an hour, 2 more FBI agents arrived, along with a federal prosecutor from the U.S. Attorney's Office. They whisked Linda away to a secure location for initial debriefing, but not before Linda grabbed my hand and made me promise I'd stay involved, that I wouldn't abandon her now. You're the only person I trust, she'd said, her eyes pleading. Please, Derek, I need you. I'd agreed, not fully understanding what I was signing up for. Rachel pulled me aside as the others escorted Linda to their vehicle. Derek, I need you to understand something. You're now a material witness in a federal investigation. Vincent Drummond's people saw you at that storage facility. They know you helped her. You're not safe either. The reality of that hadn't fully hit me until I returned to my apartment that evening to find my door slightly ajar. The lock damaged. Someone had broken in. My modest belongings were tossed around. Couch cushions slashed, drawers pulled out and emptied, my mattress overturned. They'd been looking for something, probably the flash drive or any other evidence Linda might have left behind. I didn't stay. I grabbed some clothes, my laptop, and important documents, and I left. Rachel arranged for me to stay in the same safe house where they'd taken Linda, a nondescript rental house in Bellingham, a college town 2 hours north of Seattle, near the Canadian border. It was far enough from Seattle to provide some distance from Drummond's reach, but close enough that federal agents could maintain oversight. The house was a bland, 2-story structure in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind of place that looked like every other house on the block. Beige siding, small front lawn, detached garage. Inside was equally forgettable. Basic furniture that looked like it came from a discount store, bare walls, no personal touches. It was sterile, temporary, a place designed for people in transit. Linda was already there when I arrived, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, looking small and lost. When she saw me, relief flooded her face. Derek, thank God. I was worried they wouldn't let you come. Rachel convinced them I needed protection too, I said, setting down my hastily packed bag. Plus, apparently, I'm a witness now. Lucky me. Over the next few days, FBI agents came and went, conducting extensive interviews with Linda. They'd set up a makeshift command center in the dining room, laptops, files, whiteboards covered with names and connections, charts showing money flows through various shell companies. I learned more about high-level financial fraud than I ever wanted to know. Rachel kept us updated on the investigation's progress. The flash drive had been everything they needed to begin building a case, but they needed more. Corroborating, Linda stared at the ceiling, her breathing still uneven. I used to be strong, she said quietly. I used to handle pressure at work, make million-dollar decisions, manage entire departments. And now I can't even sleep without having panic attacks. What's wrong with me? You're traumatized, I said gently. That's what's wrong. You've been threatened, assaulted, hunted. Your entire life was torn apart. Anyone would be struggling, Linda. There's no shame in that. Jason can never know how weak I've become, she whispered. He still thinks of me as his competent, together mother. If he saw me like this, he'd be proud of you, I interrupted. You're fighting back against a billionaire criminal. You're risking everything to do the right thing. That's not weakness, Linda. That's courage. She turned her head to look at me, and in the dim light from the hallway, I could see fresh tears glistening. Why are you being so kind to me? I've dragged you into this nightmare. Your apartment was ransacked. You're stuck here, unable to live your life. You should hate me. I don't hate you, I said. You needed help and I was there. That's it. Besides, I added with a small smile, my life wasn't exactly thrilling before this. At least now I have a purpose. She managed a weak laugh. Some purpose. Professional safe house companion. Hey, it's honest work, I joked. We fell into silence, and gradually, I felt her grip on my hand relax as exhaustion pulled her towards sleep. I stayed there for another hour, watching her breathing even out, making sure she was truly asleep before carefully extracting my hand and returning to my own room. It became a pattern. Every few nights, Linda would have nightmares. Sometimes about Drummond's men, sometimes about losing everything, sometimes fragmented terrors that made no sense but left her shaking and crying. And every time, I'd be there, sitting beside her bed, holding her hand, talking her through the panic until she could breathe again. During the days, we found small ways to cope with the confinement. Agent Ramirez, taking pity on us, brought us a deck of cards, and Linda taught me to play gin rummy. We played for hours, keeping score on a notepad, trash-talking each other to keep things light. I discovered Linda had a wicked sense of humor when she wasn't terrified, making sarcastic comments about the safe house's terrible decor or the bland casseroles Agent Morrison insisted on making for dinner. "I think he put sawdust in these," Linda whispered to me one evening, poking at her food. "And not even good sawdust. Like, discount, low-grade sawdust." I nearly choked on my water trying not to laugh. Agent Morrison, sitting across the room, glanced over suspiciously but said nothing. We also really talked during those long days and evenings. Linda told me about her life before everything fell apart. Her marriage that had ended in an amicable divorce when Jason was in high school. Her climb up the corporate ladder. The sacrifices she'd made for her career. I told her about my own family. My parents' retirement to Arizona that had felt like abandonment. My string of failed relationships and inability to maintain deep connections. "You're better at connections than you think?" Linda said one afternoon as we sat on the back porch, supervised by Agent Ramirez, who was pretending not to listen from just inside the door. "Look at what you've done for me. Most people would have turned me away that night, called the police, washed their hands of the whole situation. But you didn't." "I'm not sure that makes me good at connections," I said. "Maybe it just makes me a sucker who can't say no to a person in crisis." "No," Linda said firmly. "It makes you decent. It makes you rare." She paused, looking out at the small, neglected backyard. "Derek, when this is over, if this is ever over, I want you to know that you've changed my perspective on people. I'd given up, you know? After Drummond betrayed me, after people I thought were friends disappeared when I needed them, I decided that everyone was ultimately selfish, that loyalty was a myth. But you've proven me wrong." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just reached over and squeezed her shoulder. She leaned into the touch, and we sat there in comfortable silence, watching clouds roll across the gray Bellingham sky. The breakthrough came on a Wednesday morning, 3 weeks into our confinement. Rachel arrived unannounced, walking through the door with an energy we hadn't seen before. She was smiling, actually smiling. "It's done," she said. "We arrested Drummond this morning at his estate. Federal agents warrant the whole thing. He's in custody. His CFO, his head of operations, 3 board members, and his personal attorney, all arrested. We've frozen over $4 billion in assets. It's over." Linda stood up from the kitchen table so fast her chair tipped over backward. "Are you sure? Is it really?" "Really over," Rachel confirmed. "The case is airtight. His lawyers are already talking plea bargains, but we're not offering anything significant. This is going to trial and we're going to win. You're safe now, Linda. Both of you." Linda's legs seemed to give out, and she sank back down onto the chair I'd quickly righted. She put her face in her hands and sobbed, deep, wrenching sobs of relief and release. I stood beside her, my hand on her back, feeling my own eyes burn with tears I refused to shed. Agent Ramirez appeared with tissues, and Rachel gave us a moment before continuing. "There's more good news. The federal judge has ordered all your assets unfrozen. Linda, the civil suit Drummond filed against you has been dismissed with prejudice. The government is also offering you a substantial whistleblower reward under federal statute, 15% of the recovered funds. We're still calculating the exact amount, but it's going to be in the hundreds of millions." Linda looked up, her face red and streaked with tears. "I don't understand. Hundreds of millions. You exposed a multi-billion-dollar fraud scheme," Rachel explained. "The law provides compensation for whistleblowers who bring these cases to light. You've earned it, Linda, And more than that, companies are already reaching out wanting to hire you. Corporate integrity consultant, expert witness, board positions. You're going to have your pick of opportunities. Over the following days, the story broke nationally. Vincent Drummond's fall from grace was spectacular and public. News cameras caught him being led out of his mansion in handcuffs. His perfect billionaire facade finally cracked. The media devoured every detail, from the offshore accounts to the fake charities to the witness intimidation. Linda was mentioned as the brave whistleblower who'd risked everything to expose the truth. Jason flew back from Austin immediately. The reunion between mother and son at the safe house was emotional. Jason nearly crushing Linda in a hug, apologizing over and over for not being there, for not knowing what she was going through. Linda assured him there was nothing he could have done, that she'd kept it from him to protect him. Jason turned to me, his eyes red. Derek, Rachel told me everything you did. How you helped my mom, protected her, stayed with her through all of this. I don't know how to thank you. You don't need to, I said, uncomfortable with the gratitude. She's your mom. Of course I helped. But Jason pulled me into a hug anyway, his voice thick with emotion. You're a better friend than I deserve, man. Within a week, we were cleared to leave the safe house. The FBI maintained some security precautions, occasional check-ins, a panic button app on our phones, but the immediate threat was over. Drummond was in federal detention awaiting trial, his network dismantled, his power broken. Linda returned to Seattle, and I went back to my apartment, which had been cleaned and repaired by a service the FBI had arranged. It felt strange to be back in my own space, sleeping in my own bed, returning to some semblance of normal life. But nothing felt quite the same. I'd been changed by the experience, by those weeks of intensity and fear and unexpected connection. Linda stayed in touch constantly, text messages every day, phone calls several times a week. She was rebuilding her life, but she made sure I was part of it. She invited me to dinner at her house, her actual house now that it was unfrozen. A beautiful place in a nice Seattle neighborhood that made my apartment look even shabbier by comparison. I've been thinking, she said over dessert one evening, about 2 months after everything had ended. I'm done with the corporate world, at least the traditional version of it. I want to do something meaningful with this second chance. Like what? I asked. Teaching, she said. The University of Washington offered me a position, teaching business ethics, corporate governance, how to recognize and report fraud. I want to help the next generation do better, be better. Make sure what happened to me doesn't happen to others who try to do the right thing. That sounds perfect for you, I said genuinely. She smiled, then her expression turned more serious. I also want to help you, Derek. You gave up weeks of your life for me. Your apartment was destroyed. You were threatened. You deserve more than just going back to driving rideshare all night. Linda, you don't owe me. It's not about owing, she interrupted. It's about caring. You told me once that you wanted to start your own business, a community transportation service for seniors and people who need reliable, affordable rides. What if I helped you do that? Provided startup capital, helped with the business plan, used my connections to get you established.
Here.
That's incredibly generous, but it's too much. It's not too much, she said firmly. Derek, you gave me hope when I had none. You stayed with me through the worst time of my life. You held my hand through panic attacks at 3 in the morning. You made me laugh when I thought I'd never laugh again. Let me do this. Please. Looking into her earnest eyes, I realized she needed this as much as I did. She needed to give back, to use her resources for good, to help someone the way I'd helped her. Refusing would hurt her. Okay, I said quietly. Thank you, Linda. I don't know what else to say except thank you. She reached across the table and took my hand. Thank you, Derek, for everything. 6 months later, I stood in the small office of Thompson Community Transport, named partly after my last name and partly as a tribute to Linda, who'd been instrumental in making it happen. We had 3 vehicles, 2 other drivers I'd hired, and a growing list of regular clients. Seniors who needed rides to medical appointments, people with disabilities who required reliable transportation, families who couldn't afford multiple cars. Linda came by for the unofficial opening, along with Jason, Rachel, and a few other people who'd become important in my life over the past months. We toasted with cheap champagne in plastic cups, and Linda gave a short speech about courage and kindness and how small acts can change lives. Later, as people were leaving, Linda pulled me aside. "I'm proud of you," she said simply. "Look at what you've built." "We built it," I corrected. "This doesn't exist without you." "Maybe," she acknowledged, "but you're the one making it work, making it matter. That's all you, Derek." We stood there in comfortable silence, and I thought about that foggy night when I'd found her crying in her car outside my apartment. How impossible it had seemed then that anything good could come from such fear and chaos. How wrong I'd been. Our relationship wasn't romantic. It never became that, despite what some people assumed. It was something deeper and more enduring than romance. It was a bond forged in crisis, built on trust and vulnerability and mutual respect. Linda became a fixture in my life. A mentor, a friend, almost a family member. We had dinner weekly, checked in on each other constantly, celebrated successes and supported each other through setbacks. Life wasn't perfect. Linda still had occasional nightmares about Drummond, and I sometimes caught myself looking over my shoulder, old instincts from our time in hiding. But we'd both found a new equilibrium, a new purpose. And sometimes, when I was driving a sweet elderly woman to her doctor's appointment or helping a disabled veteran get his wheelchair secured in the van, I'd think about that moment in the safe house when Linda had whispered, "Please don't leave," and I'd responded, "I'm here." Those simple words had been a promise that changed both our lives. A promise that sometimes, being there for someone, really truly being there, is the most powerful thing you can do. It doesn't take grand gestures or heroic acts. Sometimes it just takes showing up, staying present, and refusing to let someone face their darkness alone. That's what Linda taught me, and that's what I hope to teach others through the work I do now. That kindness matters, that loyalty matters,